Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Adam Interviews. We interviewed yesterday Dr. Adam Frank, astrophysicist over at U of R, talking about the start of school and getting excited about science and learning. We used the book Project Hail Mary to talk about how cool science can be, and it's a movie that's coming out in March, so highly recommend that book if you'd like to get back on the horse before the school year starts. And in that vein, we have invited Brighton Superintendent Kevin McGowan to the show. Kevin, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, so start of school, it always is a little bittersweet for teachers, parents, students. What are your thoughts as we approach the first day here?
I think it's amazing. I just was with our new teachers. They're in their orientation this week, and maybe I need better hobbies, but it's exciting. This is a great time of year. Buses, the diesel fumes and whir of the engine through the neighborhood, practicing routes. It's awesome. Can't wait.
It's always funny. So you and I both have children in the middle school, high school age bracket, one of them at least. And for as much as they might gripe about the end of summer, whenever I see them in the school, they're always smiling. They're always happy.
There's a lot of enthusiasm. Yeah. My daughter just recently, are you ready to go back? Yeah, I kind of am. She's excited. Can't wait.
Yeah, exactly. And you get to, and especially when you enter high school too, which is my son's going to be a freshman. The world middle school is great, but the world opens up. The cool programs and classes that are offered now, it was great when I was there, but it's incredible now.
Oh, sure. I don't think they ever had when we were in high school. Entrepreneurship classes, coding classes, all the, variety in foreign languages, the experiences that kids can have from hands-on to advanced coursework. It's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. One thing that is amazing and also a little worrisome for parents is ChatGPT and AI, and a lot of concern over kids just using that to write and not learning how to write or using it in other aspects. What are your thoughts going into the school year with this?
Well, I think that's interesting. I think for one, sometimes that perspective is coming from people that may not understand the use of AI, right? And haven't themselves dug into that and had as many opportunities to really use it effectively as a tool. So I think there is this natural inclination to not wanting to become a society where kids can't form a sentence, can't compose a thought, can't independently think and analyze through their writing material and information. However, I also think that if you are a user of AI, you realize that it is about prompt generation. It is about having to actually think deeply about how to get the product out of AI, and that products that are created by AI without a lot of thought, without a lot of background, without a lot of work are not that great. So, high quality work still depends on a great deal of thinking, critical analysis, information, using that information, synthesizing that information. AI is just a tool to help do that. But I think we need to still give kids a tremendous background to be able to use that effectively.
Will there be monitoring of papers and whatnot to try to find out if a kid just punched a few words in and created an essay?
We still do that. We have a variety of platforms that have detected plagiarism, have detected that kind of work for a very long time. Kids still turn in papers using those platforms. I think ultimately you can't police all of that, but you can certainly by doing more independent writing in class with students in front of you that aren't using AI to generate that work.
What can parents do in this realm, both positive and for enforcement?
I think understand it. I don't know that it's so coercive as to really look at it as in terms of enforcement, but rather sit down and understand how your children may or may not be using that and how it could effectively be used as a tool. And are they following the directions that the teacher gave them? I mean, at the high school level, you're talking about a lot of independence at that point anyways. I'm not sure how much parents can really monitor or how much they can do that or have been able to for a very long time realistically. I think it's about just understanding it, and understanding is your child using the tool effectively in the way the teacher asked them to.
As the school district as a whole, is it using AI to better the system at all?
Oh, absolutely. We're all in. For one, our professional development this summer largely focused with staff on the use of AI and how they can effectively use it to be a better professional, how it can enhance their practice, grow their practice, but also how they can help kids use it as a tool to effectively communicate, to effectively enhance their work.
Interesting. So have teachers been receptive to it?
Very. They've been great. We've had a ton of people participate in professional development, and they're all in as well. I think there's a lot of ways that we can use it. You and I, before we started, were talking about some really interesting ways that AI can start to look at data trends, patterns. We can use that effectively as a tool to help us understand where to place early intervention resources earlier on and effectively change the trajectory for some kids. I think there's ways we can use it administratively to more efficiently, for example, plan bus routes. monitor finances. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that people are using this outside of the walls of public education that we as an entity can also use it.
Concerns about privacy when you get into AI, because it's a lot of data, a lot of personal information.
Yeah, so we are bound by Ed Law 2D in New York State, which is an educational law that really outlines very, very specifically how we can utilize any type of software platform, what we can use, what we can't use, and how we need to handle data. And we pay very careful attention to that.
Cell phone policy, big deal.
There's no cell phone policy? I hadn't heard about that.
You will.
Oh, my daughter texted me just now.
That's funny. The irony. So the Hochul administration, for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure you did, they mandated school districts come up with a plan, send it to the state. Has the state approved Brighton's plan? Where does that sit right now?
So the state actually, although the governor speaks about it in terms of a plan that needs to be approved, is not how the law is written. The district, every district was required to adopt a policy, so a Board of Education policy that would outline how they would administer the state's new law that from bell-to-bell cell phones or internet-enabled devices are banned. So everybody just had to simply submit that policy and evidence, in other words, a link to their website where they had created that policy. From the policy, which had to articulate probably 8 or 9 different ways what you were going to do, how parents could contact their children during the day, those types of things, then the district had to create for themselves adoptions or changes to their code of conduct for how that would be monitored, those types of like, how do you operationalize it pieces. So that was all submitted by us and by most districts by August, but it wasn't the way it has been characterized, particularly by the governor and the administration, as somehow they were approving a plan. We just had to simply submit what the policy looked like. So we did that. We did that long before the August 1st deadline, early July. It's important for people to know that in districts where people said, how could they not do that? And the governor has kind of made a deal out of how many people have not submitted plans. This was given to people in late May, early June, with the expectation that a policy would be adopted that involved stakeholder input and involvement, something that usually we would spend probably 6 months developing, working with a group of people, vetting, had to be done very, very rapidly and adopted. Was done by most people, but I think for the folks that have been called out as well, they didn't get that done. It was a Herculean effort to be able to do that in the time frame they were looking for. Our people did a great job. Large committee, involved parents, staff members came together, looked at those 8 or 9 areas that were up for discussion and debate, and came together to figure out what makes the most sense for our kids and our situation, which will be different district to district.
So what does it look like in Brighton?
You can't have them. So, the internet-enabled devices gets confusing because it's not just phones. It's also people bringing in a tablet, a laptop. And although we have a one-to-one program, we've allowed kids to bring their own devices as well. And those devices can operate on our network. It's not a problem. But the new law does not allow for that unless the devices are registered. We decided that wasn't a great approach, that the effort that it would take to register devices would be problematic, and that registering devices really wouldn't stop somebody from still using an iPad that might be useful in class but could be used just like an iPhone would have been used, and that it really wasn't in the spirit of the law. That we do provide for every student a device, so we really didn't need to go about registering people's own devices. And then there's an equity issue with relative to who can bring in their own device and what kind of device relative to, instead of just saying, well, everybody has this provided device by the school district. So we did that. But it really means for us that when a student enters the building, they need to take their phone, put it in their locker, keep it in their locker, and just not use it during the day. And then at the end of the day, they take their phone out and they can use their phone. And for us, because there were decision points around after-school activities and can people use them, in the stands at a basketball game, and we didn't go so far as to say, no, they can't do that. We just didn't feel like that was appropriate. If the whole point and spirit of the law was to say that kids are distracted by the device during the day, that there's not great things happening relative to social media or texting during the day, and we're prone to a lot of difficulties, then we wanted to really act within the spirit of that and say, bring it in, no problem. You don't have to put it in a bag at the beginning of the day. It works differently, again, for every district. I'm not criticizing anybody for their approach. We felt that lockers was an acceptable place for kids to store them. Bring them in, put them in your locker, don't use them. At the end of the day, take them out, go home, use them. If you leave during the day, because we have an open campus in our district, take your phone with you, use your phone. You can use it during the school day as long as you're not in the school building or on the campus.
What was the situation like prior to this policy in the schools?
I think it's different in every district. So this was one of the aspects of the adoption of the law, which we support. I think this is a good thing. The research will tell you it's great if we can do these things, and we should be thinking about it more on a larger scale, I think, in society. But we also typically in our district support the idea that we can think about these things not with a cleaver, but with a scalpel, right? We can be a little bit more delicate in how we think about them, and we don't have to be so draconian sometimes in the way we adopt these things. Evidence of that would be what we did previously, which was we had over the last several years moved towards kids not having them out, not having them used during class time. I think the difficulty is there are many instances where it helps for kids to learn how to effectively use the device that will be in the hand for the rest of their lives to organize themselves for executive function tasks. I mean, there are a lot of good uses. So finding the right balance was always important to us. So for example, previously, if a student had their phone and the rule was in the classroom, you can't have it out, you can't use it. But at the end of class, the teacher might say, okay, if you have your phone with you, go ahead and take a picture of the work on the board, the formula, the algorithm that's up on the board, that's no problem. We can use that as a tool effectively for learning. That was working pretty well for us. I think that, if you've read the Anxious Generation book, which is a great text on this.
I have not.
Yeah, it really helps you understand the impact that I think phones are having and technology is having on kids and adults, frankly, too. You realize that having them out during the day, then during free periods, sitting in the hallway in the cafeteria and looking at your phone instead of looking at the person across from you and conversing is problematic. And we should be trying to move away from that. So I think we're, again, very supportive of this. But it was working relatively well for us that it wasn't as much of a distraction. Our middle school, as a matter of fact, has had phones in lockers now for several years, and that's worked out really, really well.
It is interesting because you're bringing up some decent points that I guess one should consider as to the potential advantages to having them accessible, if not, in hand during the classroom at the same time. And perhaps this is a simple notion. I remember covering in 2003, New York State was debating removing cigarette smoking from bars and restaurants. And it was highly divisive. I went to diners that were, said we were going to be out of business in a week. Bars thought no one was going to come out. And then after its adoption, no one closed. And actually more people came out because now they didn't leave the place with their clothes stinking like cigarettes. And again, it's probably a very naive prediction on my part, but I do wonder that after the adoption of this cell phone policy, if there's going to be a similar reflection on society's parts, being like, why didn't we do this 5 years ago?
Oh, I think you're spot on. I think that is what's going to happen. And I also think that we don't give kids enough credit sometimes for managing these types of things. So as much as there's a lot of anxiety about it leading up to the beginning of school, and by the way, for all of the high school administrators out there who are thinking easy for you to say you're not in a high school each and every day, you're right. I'm not going to manage it the same way. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of confidence, though, in the adults that will and kids to roll with it. And I think they will look back and realize, you know what, maybe that wasn't such a huge deal. And it worked out pretty well. If we just kind of ease into it, work through it, it'll be okay. Like I said, in our middle school, it's worked out really well. And I think kids will find it to be a relief, like not having your clothes smell like cigarettes. People will look back on it and think this worked out well.
Yeah. And then elementary school, I know some districts are doing it where elementary students are allowed to carry it with them because they're not pulled as much in that direction. Yeah, how about in Brighton?
Yeah, no, the law really is pretty clear that we can't do that.
Okay.
Again, you could do this idea of registering devices, and some have found a way to give this broad registering for whatever reason. We just felt like that. And again, K through 5, we really haven't had them allowed anyways. So we've already been functioning where kids just didn't have those. What we did see was a growth in, I think it would be referred to as wearables, right? So watches, for example.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, and they're not supposed to. And we've, over the last couple of years, had a couple of different situations where we've kind of worked through with families, you know what, it doesn't work out so well, and we'd rather they leave them in the locker. And by and large, that's always worked out great. I think there's 2 exceptions I want to point out. When somebody has a device that monitors, for example, blood sugar level, and the app is only able to be monitored using their phone, there's exceptions that are made. That's very, very rare. So in a 1,200 student high school, that's probably, count on 1, maybe 2 hands, the number of kids where there would be an exception. Those would be the only kind of exceptions. And one other important point is that all of the apps and the opportunities to organize yourself. So I mentioned, it was kind of unfortunate because people were learning how to use the phone effectively. What we've said is, this is forcing us to think differently and look at that device, that laptop or tablet that we're providing. And most of that can actually be duplicated in that space as well. So that's where we're kind of finding an opportunity to say, well, we actually have this other piece of technology that can do those same things.
No. And you already kind of touched upon this next point is there's always a perception. I've, been alive for 40 plus years here, and there's always the next generation up can't do anything. They're helpless. We're all society's, going to hell in a handbasket. But you're up close, and my mom was an educator as well, and I always think back to the line in the one song, "The kids are all right." But at some point, maybe they won't be, and maybe we shouldn't just bury our heads in the sand. Are the kids all right? Are you talking about a book where there may be a bit of anxiety linked to technology and whatnot, but overall, how are we doing?
I think the kids are awesome. So I'm really, really hopeful on this topic. I think our kids today volunteer more, they work more, they study more, they achieve at a higher level. And by the way, every generation before them doesn't want to hear that, right? This is where would we be as Americans if we didn't say that, to your point, that this generation is just, the kids these days. I say the kids these days are amazing.
Yeah.
I do worry. So it's not with some kind of obliviousness that I say all that. I do worry about mental health. I do worry about anxiety. I do worry about some of those factors. As a parent, I look carefully at those things and think about this current generation, and are they developing the same grit and perseverance as previous generations? Are they too reliant on technology? Is technology affecting that? But I think those worries or those concerns are not characterizations of what this generation is. They are more the things as an educator and as a dad I think about, and making sure that we're differentiating the support we give and the education we give based on the needs of a different generation. That doesn't mean it's a deficit. It doesn't mean that, the kids are going to be a problem. I actually think they're amazing. And I think they are absolutely going to solve the problems of division that we see today, the political rhetoric we see today, the lack of compromise we see today. And that's not a political statement. That's just overall as humans, I think that's where we're at. I don't think kids are in that same place. And I'm very hopeful, and I see it firsthand in my own kids, but in the kids that I'm around all the time, they really are the hope. And they're pretty gifted people who I think are going to make a big difference.
Speaking of that's interesting, given that I don't remember a time where politics has entered the classroom as much as right now, whether it's talking about gender language, sensitivity language, but also different books that people think should or shouldn't be in the library. These school board meetings that we've seen I've never seen anything like that. And I've been covering board meetings for 25 years. It's interesting to me the separation between you saying that they are less politically divisive and we're seeing more politics enter the school grounds.
And I think kids are not interested in that. I think they're not interested in being told that they can't read a particular book. They're not interested also in being told what to think, right? So we should be focused on developing their skills in terms of how to reason, how to consume information, how to analyze the quality of information, and how to rigorously debate and discuss issues, but without a political perspective. So we have tried over the last several years, and really emphasized it more recently, to create a space in our classrooms where we are not, as educators, sharing a political perspective, but rather sharing a space and creating a space for people to freely express their own perspectives and to develop their ability to critically analyze, debate, and discuss and come to some kind of resolution. The only exception to that, and I think it's always important to point out, is when it comes to issues of humanity. I think it's really unfortunate that we have allowed issues related to human beings to become the political issues. So whether that's gender identity, sexuality, race, I recognize why politics has so directly gone into that space. And the notion of politics being the competition for resources and ideas lends itself to that. Campaigns lends itself to that. Popularity lends itself to that. But we've allowed those very human issues to be co-opted only by politicians, which results in a discussion that questions another person's humanity. So in our classrooms, there won't be a debate about gender identity. We've started from the premise saying, no, that's a thing, right? That we're not going to question that. That is what it is, and we respect that. We embrace that. That's important. And our position is that's not a political position. That's a reality. That's a human reality. So that's not up for debate. We're not going to question another person's humanity. But we should discuss what are the political ramifications, what are the policy ramifications, what's happening in the world. And it's all right to do that, and we should make sure we create that space without coming at it from one political perspective only.
I didn't intend to get into this, but I guess it's a road that was just paved. Is when it comes to trans athletes, I've heard people on the left say, absolutely, gender identity, support. With trans athletes, we've worked so hard to get biological females a space to play sports. Is there a safety issue there? Are there other issues that we should be considering when we deal with this type of issue?
I think we need to consider the needs of the human being, not my child will lose a scholarship or, somehow it's unfair. I think, for one, people need to realize the scope of the issue. This is an exceedingly rare situation that we're discussing. So where people, again, have made that human issue a big political issue because it's interesting to talk about, it gets attention, headlines, whatever it might be, it marginalizes other human beings, and it's this like competition, that we have. I just would say to you that it is exceedingly rare that this actually comes up. It is even more exceedingly rare that a male athlete would be dominating in a male identifying athlete would be dominating in a female sport in such a way that is unsafe for somebody or somehow changes the competition. And as soon as you say that, people will give you examples of a gold medalist or a NCAA champion or somebody that has robbed somebody else of this. I would say to you that is such a rare occurrence that I think it's a little bit of a red herring. And I think that when we're talking about issues of humanity, we can do better and we can have more thoughtful, intelligent discussions. And I think the bodies of sport have often found solutions to this relative to like track and field, for example, and understanding the impact on hormone therapy, on competition, and coming up with some regulations around that. I think we're smart people and we can figure this out.
When we hear about the dismantling of the Department of Education on the federal level, in an outsider's perspective, I mean, I do a little bit of reading for stories that I do locally, but that seems so monumental. On the ground floor, how does that impact our local school districts?
I think, first of all, there's a philosophical impact. I think we struggle a little bit with, person who's championed professional wrestling and refers to AI as A1 steak sauce, for example, as the leader of this policy-making body across the country. What I think people need to understand is that largely the responsibility of a free, appropriate public education falls on each of the 50 states. So the vast majority of our funding comes locally from both the local property tax base, but state funding. Federal money comes, but through the state. So federal money is provided, the state education departments administer that. And it comes in the form of title grants. So the title money's first, LBJ initiative to be anti-poverty initiatives, drive money towards impoverished areas, particularly urban centers across the country. So most of the funding depends on financial qualification or where there are deficits. And it goes to very specific types of programming. It also goes to free and reduced lunch. It goes to those types of programs, essentially anti-poverty and anti-deficit models. So there is a big concern because even though it's not a lot of dollars, one, the administration of those dollars based on very clear philosophy or political perspectives is just a concern. And I think that's something we're seeing in a lot of different places in our society, the concern over how is government influencing our spending based on just a very one perspective kind of focus. And by the way, I acknowledge that that's a perspective on the right and the left over the last decade or more. The amount of money may be small, but in a property tax capped environment, making up for those federal dollars is a real problem. And I don't believe the state in any way, shape, or form could afford to mitigate the loss of those dollars either. So that could have a big impact. For us, it's over $2 million. And ballpark numbers for us, that's over a 4.5% increase in taxes to make up for that, which is never going to happen. That's not what we would do. And again, that's remedial programming, that's free and reduced lunch programming, that's a whole lot of how do we help human beings who need additional help. So that is a concern. And having that conditioned on sign-offs that we will have a particular political perspective is a real problem. So I think that's one part of it. The other problem is that, remember, the federal government largely, at least the education department, also impacts education relative to civil rights law. So they are looking across the country at equity, and the entire division of the education department that would look at whether or not you are being equitable and thoughtful and violating civil rights, it has really been dismantled in large part at this point. So making sure that people are creating the right space for kids and being equitable in that, being fair in that, treating all human beings fairly. That's, I think, a real concern from a civil rights perspective, less a financial issue.
That's very interesting. And again, informative to me is I assumed they had a larger role in some areas and they don't, and maybe a smaller role in others, but they have a larger one in that other one. So with a couple minutes left, want to transition a bit more positive topic here. Advice for parents in the last week or two as we get ready for school.
One, enjoy the time together over the next, couple of weeks. It's a roller coaster ride. It's a journey from September through June. It gets busy and people are running all over the place. So I just say as a dad, kind of soak up the opportunities to have quiet nights and enjoy that. I think start to get back into routines. Not a bad idea. I'm saying this is a little bit of self-talk in my own household as well. Get back into routines and start to kind of ease into that, because the first couple of days are long. There's a lot happening and it's a lot to re-engage in. So soak it up, get back into routines. And then I think I would say also just enjoy like the opening of the gift that it is to start the school year and the excitement of that journey. Be positive about that, be excited about that. And finally, I'd say just give grace, be patient, recognize that school systems now are working with thousands of variables, thousands of children that they are treating as their own and prize and cherish every human being they're working with. But they are also dealing with a lot of variables relative to transportation. We've never transported people to more different places with different arrangements for people's families. That's complicated. Those are really complicated systems. And we don't have large staffs to do that work in a lot of school districts or any school districts. So understand that the people that are doing that work are doing everything to keep your child safe as a first priority. But just be patient as we work through any of the bumps in the road. And that goes for scheduling, that goes for busing, that goes for kind of all the logistical things. It's a big lift to bring 3,600 people for us back into a space and to do that effectively and efficiently. It actually goes remarkably smoothly each and every year due to a lot of hard work. But I would just say, be patient, communicate, people will work with you, we'll figure it out. And all of a sudden, we'll turn around 2 weeks from now and be right back into the routines we were in a few months ago.
There you go. Kevin McGowan, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Have a great year.
Oh, yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Kevin McGowan, Superintendent of the Brighton Central School District. I want to thank him once again for coming in and helping us gear up for this new school year, 2025-2026. It's hard when you think about it that we're saying those years, and here we are. So if you enjoyed this program, you can go back, check out the others that we've done so far through the Adam Interview series. We've got a good lineup coming up for the rest of the week. We hope that you can join us for that, and encourage your friends to go get the Rochester First app. It is free to download on any smart TV out there that has Roku, Apple TV, Fire, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great one.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.